Dear sewing friends, it's Alisa here with Thoughtful Creativity. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And we are sewing and drafting this shirt that I'm wearing right now. And if you've seen the linen top tutorial a couple days ago, then you will be very delighted to know that the construction is basically the same. We're just going to make a few minor adjustments to achieve the look that we're going for. And the inspiration for this shirt I found on Pinterest, but since it's summer, I decided to make it short sleeve and add just a couple of little touches of my own, so to speak, design. And the same deal, it's going to be very quick and easy to make. Couple of hours of your time, 1 yard of fabric, a few measurements, and you will be done in no time. And with that, I really want to show you that you don't always have to go the most difficult way to really sew and achieve the look that you really want. But in the meantime, let's get started drafting. You're watching Easy Sewing DIY, a weekly series where I make a simple pattern, then I sew it and love it. Everything is straightforward, so you can make it as well. Tune in for new episodes every weekend. So the first measurement for this quick and easy shirt is going to be the length of the actual garment. And please note here that the front and the back pattern piece for this top is going to be completely identical for the exception of two things, the neckline and the hemline. So we're going to start to build our pattern from the back. You're going to take your measuring tape, you're going to place it on the center back at the very edge of the neckline, and you're going to drop it all the way to your tailbone, just like this. Once you have your finger on the tailbone, you're going to take it away and you're going to put that measurement on your pattern paper. Mine, as always, is 21.5 inches, but for this particular easy breezy top, I'm going to take 21 inches just to make it a little bit easier for us to work with. And again, that half an inch is not going to play a big part in this particular pattern because it's just going to be nice and loose. Now, while we're at it, let's divide the length of the actual garment in 3 equal parts. That is going to mark very roughly where is our bust line, where is our waistline, and where is our hip line at the tailbone. Now, I know you guys asked in the last video, well, what to do if one of my parts is significantly longer than the other one and 3 equal parts is just not going to do me any good. Well, guys, your biggest clue is right in front of you. Your body is your biggest clue. So instead of marking it in 3 equal parts, you can take your measuring tape and measure the distance from one to another and then put that on your pattern piece. Easy as that. So for the shoulder line, I'm going to take 20 inches just like I did for my linen top tutorial. So that way at the end of this one, you'll be able to see that the construction is pretty much exactly the same for the exception of a few minor tweaks that made this pattern into a new garment. But if you were not present for that linen top tutorial, the link will be in the info box below. But basically what you do is you take your measuring tape, 20 inches is right here, and you pretty much measure a drop shoulder. So you're not going to measure it from the edge of the shoulder to another edge of the shoulder, but you're going to drop it by a tiny bit, so that way it's a drop shoulder. Then we're going to divide it in half, and that's what's going to go on the half of our pattern. Now onto the neckline. I take, as always, 3.5 inches to the right and 2.5 inches for the depth of my neckline. But if you feel that this is going to be too narrow, you can take a measurement that's a little bit bigger. However, just remember this, it's always easier to cut away than to add back to it. Besides, neckline is probably one of the easiest things to adjust on any pattern. So I would suggest for you to go conservative and then to go bigger if you decide that narrow neckline just doesn't fit you, or maybe you decide to go with the V-neck or scoop neck or whatever else. Now from the edge of your neckline, you're going to take 1 inch up, and then from the edge of your shoulders, you're going to take 1 inch down, and then you're going to draw a line that's going to create a shoulder line. Now in the linen top tutorial, I did add an extra inch to that shoulder line just to make it a little bit longer, and that's what I'm doing here. But the reason why we are taking the shoulder line 1 inch up and 1 inch down is because our shoulders are not straight. They're a little bit on the angle, and if you take a look at our neckline, of course we're drafting it from the back, but if you take a look at the front neckline and the back neckline is exactly the same principle, then you will see that the center of the neckline is definitely a lot lower than the edge of the neckline, right? So that's the reason we are taking that 1 inch up to accommodate that difference. Now with a curved dashed line, draw a back neckline and the front neckline. And if you're having trouble with making really nice curved lines, you can always use a coaster, a plate, a mug, whatever you have to kind of help you out with that nice curved line. Now let's talk about our bust line, waistline, and hip line at the tailbone. And what we're going to do is we're going to measure, and then we're going to add an inch of ease, and then we're going to put each one of these measurements on our lines of the pattern. So let's do the bust line together. We're taking our measuring tape. We are measuring the full measurement of the bust. And for me, that is going to be 36 inches. Now, we're only going to take a quarter of this because we're only working with a quarter of the pattern. And for me, that's going to be 9 inches. Add an inch of ease, that equals to 10 inches. And that's what I'm going to put on my bust line. And you're going to repeat the same process for your waistline and your hip line at the tailbone. So you're not measuring your actual hips, you're measuring your hips at the tailbone because that's where our pattern ends. Okay, we're almost there. Let's talk about the sleeve one more time. So we're going to extend the length of the sleeve by about 2 inches because in this case, I want it to be a little bit longer to kind of look like a shirt. So we're extending it by 2 inches, and then for the width of the sleeve, I'm going to take 7 inches. And the way I do it, you just take your measuring tape and you measure how wide you want your sleeve to be. So 14 inches like this seems like a pretty good width. So half of that is going to be 7 inches. And we're gonna drop it down on the right angle, 90-degree angle, so that way when we cut our pattern out, it's not going to make a really awkward line over here, but it's going to be nice and smooth and straight all the way around. If you take our linen top pattern that we made last week and you compare it to this shirt pattern, you will see that on the linen top, we dropped 1 inch from the bust line to be able to curve in that sleeve and drop it all the way to the hem to do the side seam. However, because this shirt pattern sleeve is wider and also deeper, we are going to drop it by an extra inch. So we're going to take 2 inches down from the bust line, and then we're going to very nicely start curving in that line and go all the way into the side seam. And when I'm doing my side seam, you will see that I'm not curving that line all the way to the waistline. Instead, I'm kind of making really nice and smooth instead of doing like, you know, a really sharp curve. But you can do however you would like. But in my opinion, making a really nice smooth curve accounts for a really good looking garment. On to the hem. So for the front of the hem, I'm going to take 3 inches, and for the back of the hem, I'm going to take 5 inches. And because I want it to look like a shirt, I'm going to curve in my hem like a traditional classic shirt would look like. So that's what I'm doing right here. Part of this tutorial is done. Now we're gonna cut it out and we're gonna move on to the sewing. Now please note, here I'm cutting my pattern without seam allowances because that's how I like to work with it. However, if you rather have seam allowances on the pattern right away, then do your seam allowances first and then cut out your pattern. I'm going to place my fabric on the fold and we're going to cut our front piece first. Usually I would do the other way around, but because the hem on the front is definitely a lot shorter than the back, it's going to make it for a little bit easier process if we do the front first. Now here's a little thing to keep in mind, because my shirt has kind of like a placket in the middle of the front. We need to make sure that our left part of the top is by about ½ an inch longer than the right part of the top, because we're going to overlap them together, and that is going to account to make sure that it's all nice and centered. And of course, as I am cutting, I'm also adding my seam allowances. Now I'm gonna cut away ½ an inch from the right side because I want my left side to be a little bit longer at the center front, and the right side is going to be normal pattern. And I'm going to take that right side, I'm going to lay on the fold of my fabric one more time, and then I'm going to cut the back piece of my pattern. Now, once we have all 4 pieces of our pattern done, well, of course, you know, the back is on the fold and the front we cut in the middle, we are going to serge the side seams and the shoulder seams. Now, if you don't have a serger, you don't have to use a serger. You can use zigzag stitch. I've been doing that for years before I got my serger, and it works perfectly fine. Now, once the side seams and the shoulders are serged, we're gonna stitch them together. After that, we're gonna finish our hem, And once the hem is done, and note how I do the hem, I fold it in once and then I do the stitch and then I trim it a little bit so that way it's a little bit easier to fold it one more time, and then do the second fold and I stitch it one more time, and that makes it for a really nice and easy kind of like curved hem like the traditional classic shirt would have. Now once the hem is done, we're going to do the front placket of our shirt, and that's where we're going to fake it until we make it, because we're not going to do the traditional shirt placket because I personally can't stand do buttons. So you know what, I'm just going to do a very simple wide bias tape, and that's going to do for our placket. And instead of the collar or a mandarin collar, we're going to do a bias tape as well, and that's going to do it. And in this case, I had a choice between either just like a white bias tape or this really nice kind of like glittery polka dotted one. And you know what, for some reason I thought, you know what, the glittery polka dotted one kind of made it look really fun and interesting and just, you know, different as well. So once the placket is done and our neckline is done, we're going to move on to the sleeve. And guess what, here we're going to do the bias tape as well. And then we're going to fold, we're going to roll the cuff, and we're going to add a little tab just to kind of hide that seam away as well, you know, the serge seam, and just to add a little design element to it. And pretty much that's it. That's all there is to it. You don't have to do the tab, you don't have to do the sleeves. You can just finish sleeves with a simple rolled hem or just bias tape, but that's what's gonna make this shirt simple, easy, straightforward. Oh, and of course, once your front placket is done, you're just gonna stitch 2 inches apart to really close the front. You can do the buttons if you want, but in my case, just like I mentioned, I can't stand doing the buttons, so a little stitches to hold this all in place will do just fine. Thank you so much for watching. I hope it inspired you to make and create something simple and beautiful for yourself for this summer. If you want to see more tutorials of the linen shirt and the other drafting tutorials, you'll see them on your screen right now. Until next time, happy thoughtful sewing, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!